So we've been looking at the Christian assurances for the past month, this whole June. And if you're a Christian, whether for the past 5 weeks or for the past 5 decades, then you can be sure of certain things, right? We can be sure of salvation, as David told us a couple of weeks ago. That means that we know that we're heaven-bound after death. We can be assured of victory. We fight from a position of victory, not for victory. We're assured of answered prayer, as Uncle Jeff reminded us last week. That means that our prayers to our Father in heaven don't go ignored. They are, every one of them, answered, even if the answer isn't always yes. And next week we'll learn that we are assured of forgiveness as well. And that's really a blessed assurance to have, because we know that every single wrong thing that we've ever done or will ever do, and every good thing that we neglected to do in our lives, we are forgiven for that on account of what Jesus has done on the cross. So we thank God that it's got nothing to do with us, but that the finished work of Jesus has accomplished that for us. Today, we're going to talk about the assurance of guidance. The Christian knows that his God guides him and leads him as he walks through this life. He knows what this sounds like, what this feels like, and he's acutely in tune with God's Holy Spirit as he directs him. We're going to unpack this a little bit more through the study of Numbers 9. But before we do, can I invite you to bow your head in prayer with me? Heavenly Father, we thank you for this morning. Please guide us, Lord. Help us first to be assured of your guidance. And Lord, then would you grant us patience, obedience, and perseverance as we seek to follow your guidance. For Lord, if you guide us, then we must follow you. May we walk away today assured of your guidance and determined to follow it. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thank you. I want to start off today by asking us all a question. Have you ever been lost? I mean, really and seriously lost. I wonder if any of you recognize this picture. Maybe some of us have been. This is the Brunei jungle. And many years ago, I was sent here to hone my navigational skills. The idea was you were put there on mission, 9 days, 4 of you were sent off in the jungle and you had to go and find your way to various checkpoints. And at the end of it, if you did successfully, you got a little badge. And this badge was very important. Now, you were out there, as you can imagine, no iPhones, no iPads, just a compass and a map, like a hard copy map. And we had to go out there doing our topographical navigation. Now, as you can imagine, inevitably, our little group of 4 or 5 of us got lost in the jungle. Now, we have a GPS. Each group has a GPS for medical purposes. If you really need to use it in case there's a situation out there, you are allowed to break the seal and to find your way back to the camp. But of course, if you did so, you failed the course. So everyone was quite loath to open the GPS. Now, as I mentioned, we got lost out in the jungle. And it's not so bad to get lost in a group of 4 or 5, right? Because, you can sit around, and that's what we did. We found a little clearing, we put all our bags down, and we started eating our combat rations and fellowshipping over the food. But 1-2 hours passed, and then we started to think, actually we better get on this journey, otherwise we're never going to get our badge. So one of our friends said, guys, actually I think I know the way that we came. You just let me go and recce for 5-10 minutes. I'll come back, and I think we should be on our way. And like fools, none of us objected. And so my friend walked off into the Brunei jungle alone. 5 minutes passed, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. We started to get a little bit worried. And so we started calling out his name. No response. Some of us decided to go recce around the area, but we didn't dare go too far because in case we would get lost as well. The next hour or so was one of the most harrowing experiences of his life. Later on, we reconciled, thank God, but he said that during that time, he was screaming and yelling our names at the top of his lungs. We didn't hear a word. We also were shouting for him, but he didn't hear anything. The foliage was so thick, and he had gone so far from the group that he was lost, and that his voice couldn't be heard by us. Imagine if he had been the guy with the GPS, how his mindset would have completely changed, how he would have had peace, how he would have had assurance that, okay, at least I can break the seal, never mind if we don't get the badge, at least I escaped from Brunei alive. Well, God's guidance is like that GPS. The GPS tells us where to go, how to get there, when to turn. If any of you have used a GPS, then you know, of course, that the GPS likes to tell you to make a U-turn, make a U-turn. And when the GPS tells you to do that, often what do? If you're a familiar driver, you just ignore it, right? You go straight, you say, I know this road. I don't need the GPS to tell me where to go. So God's guidance is like the GPS. It can be followed, it can be ignored. If ignored, then we end up in a world of pain. We end up in all kinds of inconveniences and troubles that we could have avoided. And in the end, in the long run, we end up lost in every sense of that word. But if we follow the GPS instructions, then we get to where we want to go on time and on target. And so that is why we should follow the GPS's instructions just as we should follow God's guidance to us. God's guidance can be followed, but we need three postures, I think, to really benefit from His guidance. And they are patience, to follow God's timing, even when He seems to us to be too slow; obedience, to follow God's instructions, to carefully obey each and every one of the laws that He's told us; and we need perseverance, because we need to follow Him at all costs through the long course of life. God guides us, but we must follow. So if you have your Bibles with you, could you please turn with me to Numbers chapter 9? So the context of this passage is quite interesting. Some of you will know that the Hebrew name for the book of Numbers isn't actually the Hebrew word numbers. In fact, the Hebrew name for the book of Numbers is Bamidbar, which means in the wilderness. And that's exactly where verse 1 sets our passage today, in the wilderness of Sinai. This is the Sinai Peninsula today. This is Egypt. Cairo is over here. And then this is the Jordan River, and Israel is over here. And today, Egypt is under the sovereign territory, the Sinai is under the sovereign territory of Egypt, the country. Okay, so this is where we are in the Sinai Peninsula. And verse 1 also gives us a timestamp. It says we're in the first month of the second year after they had come out of the land of Egypt, which means that the Israelites had been on the road for the past 1 year after the Exodus. This is a little timeline that I put together to kind of show you just how busy that year on the road was. So if you can cast your minds back to last year when they were in Egypt, on the first day of the first month, this month is called Nisan, okay, just like the car. This month is about March or April in our calendar, the Gregorian calendar. And so God tells the people of Israel on first Nisan, today is the first day of the first month of your year. Today is New Year's Day. 2 weeks from now, you are going to be leaving Egypt forever. Okay, and true enough, in 2 weeks' time, they left Egypt. This was the festival of the Passover, where the Spirit of God passed over the houses of the Israelites whose doors were daubed with blood, the sheep's blood. And so they left Egypt. Pharaoh tries to chase them, but he fails. God parts the Red Sea, and then they are out in the wilderness. Just 3 days into their march, they run out of water, and so God has to provide water for them in the desert, which He does. Not long after that, they run out of food, and so God provides them manna and quail for them to meet their needs. And then, as though that weren't enough, shortly after that, they have to fight a war. This ragtag nation of newly freed slaves has to fight with a new enemy, the Amalekites, just after leaving the Egyptians. But God guides them to victory as Moses intercedes for them on top of the hill, and as Aaron and Hur pray for Moses. And so in the end, finally, they make it to Mount Sinai, which is the Sinai Peninsula. Now, you'll notice that from the 1st of Nisan to the receipt of the Torah, the law, is about 7 weeks, 2.5 months. Just about 2 months, yeah. And this festival is therefore called the Festival of Weeks, or Shavuot. And the Jewish tradition holds that it was on Shavuot that the law was given to the people of Israel by God. What were some of the things that God told Moses on top of Mount Sinai? One of the things He told them was, on the first day of the first month, that means 1st of Nisan next year, you must erect the tabernacle. Okay? So, in 1 year's time, actually less than that, you have to construct this thing that I'm calling the tabernacle, do it according to my instructions. And as you can see, that means that there's about a 9-month lead time. Moses is up here for 2 stretches of 40 days, right? Receiving the law, receiving all of God's instructions exactly as God tells them. He hears, he listens, he writes it down, he communicates to the Israelites. And so the Israelites have 9 months construction time. So this tabernacle, this is a very helpful little mock-up of what the tabernacle would have looked like from the ESV Study Bible. And you can see that it's quite elaborate, right? Inside is the Ark of the Covenant. You can see that there are no less than 4 coverings for the tabernacle. Each one has to be hand-stitched out in the desert. There's an altar of incense that rises over here. There's the veil, the candelabra. This is the menorah. And this is the table of showbread. So not only did they have to make all this out in the desert, they also had to bake bread daily, which had to be put there. And this is, I think, supposed to be Aaron or one of the priests, one of his sons. This is an actual life-size replica of the tabernacle in southern Israel, in a place called Timnah National Park. It's a 4-hour drive from the airport all the way in the south, and as you can see, it's not all that big, right? You can probably tour the whole thing in under 10 minutes. So it's not on many people's pilgrimage itineraries precisely for this reason. You drive for 4 hours and you can see the whole thing. Okay, this is that's nice. Next place is about 6 hours drive away. So nobody really comes here, but this is what it looks like. Why am I sharing you all this information? To show you that the tabernacle wasn't all that big. And yet the Israelites had no less than 9 months to get everything ready. They had to obediently and carefully construct every single aspect of the tabernacle. They had to construct the altar, the basin, they had to construct all the pillars and all the frames, and they had to basically wait for God's 1st of Nisan deadline. Similarly for us, we need to not preempt God when He gives us deadlines. We also need to patiently wait for our 1st of Nisan, not to rely on our own preference and logic. And sometimes we may also feel that our 1st of Nisan seems like a very long way away. We, look to God and we're like the Israelites who think that we're ready. How come God is so slow? Maybe you're in a thankless job, either at the workplace or at home, and you say to God, Lord, I'm ready to move. But the cloud doesn't move, the cloud stays there. And you ask your cell group to pray for the situation at home, or you send out CVs, or you go for interviews, but there's no change. The work goes on unappreciated, the child remains petulant, the difficulties only grow. God has placed you in this position not without purpose. Romans 8:28 reminds us that for those who love God, all things work together for good, including the waiting. The difficult boss, the unreasonable clients, the child who is giving you a lot of problems, they can all serve to build us up. I look back on my own struggle to find a job, and I realized that this was really true in my case as well. I was intentionally unemployed for a while because I was a stay-at-home dad, and it was the best 6 months, just the 3 of us, right? This was my firstborn. But after 6 months, I had intended to go back to the workforce. And so I started sending out CVs with 3 months to go, 2 months, 1 month. I started getting a bit nervous. Finally, the time came when my self-proclaimed paternity leave was up. But I still didn't have a job to go back to. And I began to get a little bit worried. And so as I waited on the Lord, I got offered I almost made it to one particular place that I really wanted to go to. I got to the last round of interviews, but finally the door was shut. This whole period of waiting on the Lord, first of all, really grew in me a deep humility. It grew in me a dependence on the Lord. And also, when I finally got a job, created in me a lot of gratitude, both to the Lord and to my current employers for the job that I now have. One of my favorite authors, C.S. Lewis, in his classic Mere Christianity, says, I'm sure that God keeps no one waiting unless He sees that it is good for him to wait. And then he says, you will find that the wait has done you some kind of good which you would not have had otherwise. And I find that my own experience agrees with this statement. But of course, I do want us to guard against this idea of post-rationalization, against simply thinking that the status quo is God's will. Waiting in difficult circumstances is only good for us if God has called us indeed to wait. And so this comes down to a slightly difficult and slightly different topic, which is how to hear God's word, how to discern His will, how to seek His voice. That is a whole other sermon by itself, but I just want to share with you 2 things that have really helped me and that I believe God uses to guide me in my own experience. The first is this. When verses or ideas are repeated in my mind within very short succession. So 2 weeks ago, I was doing my QT, and I came across this passage, Jeremiah 17:8, which talks about how the man who trusts in God is like the tree who is planted by the water, just like the first psalm. And I thought that's a very nice passage. I didn't think much more about it, and I went on with my daily routine. 2 hours later, I was attending a wedding, and this very passage was preached back to me. Now, first of all, this is a kind of an odd passage for a wedding service, so it surprised me. And second of all, what are the odds of this being repeated to you within 2 hours of the same morning? So I sat up and I started to wonder, okay, God, what are you trying to say to me? So I gathered from this that, okay, God's telling me to be like the man who trusts in God. Trust God, Leon, it was what I thought that he was saying to me, so that you'll be like the man who is planted by the water, whose leaves never wither. Just last week at church camp, YA camp. How many of you are at YA camp? Oh, here, right? Okay, all the YA camp people are here. Anyone at the top? So 2 weeks ago, last week I was at YA camp, and I was doing my QT, and I came across this verse, Isaiah 9:6. The government will be upon his shoulders. And then I was speaking with a friend, and then we talked about the Christmas sermon from 2016, which also talked about this verse. And then shortly after that, the speaker for the church camp, Joseph Chien, covered this verse as well when he was praying for the different segments of society. One of them was government, and he also quoted Isaiah 9:6. 3 different sources within the span of 12 hours. And that really got me to also sit up and say, okay, what are you trying to say, Lord? I don't need to tell you that the odds for something like that to happen, given the thickness of the Bible, is incredibly low. So God guides us through repeated ideas that are impressed upon us, either when we read the Word or maybe a friend texts you. These are some of the ways that God guides, right? And we believe that nothing happens by chance. So these things aren't just random occurrences. The second way I think that God can guide us is through aligned circumstances. And what I mean by that is that, things line up so nicely, so uncannily that you begin to suspect this definitely is a God job. Let me give you an example of this. This was one of the ways he guided me as I prepared this sermon, right? Assurance of guidance, which is really quite an apt sermon to be preaching on for your first one. I really prayed, God, please guide me as I prepare this sermon. But I was pretty much given free rein to choose any passage in the Bible that I wanted, and I shortlisted about 5 or 6. But I landed on Numbers 9 because there was something about the imagery of the fire and cloudy pillar guiding the Israelites through the desert that struck a chord in me. It didn't strike me at the time the significance of this passage, but let me explain it to you. It's a little bit long-winded, but bear with me and it'll make sense in the end. This is a Torah reading schedule. The Torah is basically the first 5 books of the Bible. Torah in Hebrew means law or instruction. And one thing I learned from the Jews when I was in Israel is that they love their Torah. So they read it every day. Jesus constantly referred to it. Even today, everywhere you go, even in Singapore, you'll find that Jews all over the world are reading from the same portion of Torah any given Sabbath. So the Jewish New Year begins in September. I know I told you just now that Nisan is March and April. It's complicated. They have about 2 New Years. I don't know why, but that's just the case that it is. So their New Year begins in September. And so they'll begin reading Genesis 1 over here. They'll read all the way through. Come December, they'll be reading Exodus. In the spring, they'll read Leviticus. Around this time, they'll be reading Numbers. And then come the summertime, they read Deuteronomy. When they come to the end of Deuteronomy, in a celebration called the Joy of the Torah, they will read the last verses of Deuteronomy together with the first verses of Genesis to symbolize the completion of the Torah. So they really love their law. And as I mentioned, today's reading is taken from Numbers, right? It's from a passage called Beha'alotcha. Can I get you to say that with me? 1, 2, 3. Gotta get the cha. One more time. Beha'alot cha. Very good. So Beha'alot cha is actually the Torah portion that is read this weekend all over the world, including in the 2 synagogues in Singapore. Anything strike you about this passage? The very passage that I chose, without knowing, Numbers 9, was the same passage that would be covered this very weekend, 22nd, 23rd July 2019. God is a God who can align all these circumstances without us knowing, and then in the end we look back and we say, that was pretty amazing, God. So our God is a God who who guides. And as we believe that nothing happens by chance, this really reinforces how God lines things up. So these are just the two ways that I felt in my own experience that God speaks to me. He guides me by repeated ideas and verses. He guides me also through aligned circumstances. So we've learned that we need patience to follow God's timing. We're also going to study the second posture that I believe we need to benefit from God's guidance, and that is obedience to follow His instruction. So, what were God's instructions to us? When Moses was up on Mount Sinai, God told him, okay, you are supposed to go and receive from the Israelites gold, silver, bronze, precious yarns, finely twined linen, goat's hair from your goats, ram skins from your rams. You've got to give me goat skins, acacia wood. Have you ever wondered where they got all the wood in the jungle, in the desert? Oil for the lamps, as well as spices for the anointing oil and for fragrant incense. You have to have precious stones that are big enough to fit into this thing called the ephod and the breastpiece, and let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell in their midst. Exactly as I show you concerning the pattern of the tabernacle and all of its furniture, you must make it. I wonder often what Moses must have been thinking when he received these instructions from God, right? Because these are a group of refugees. They've left the only home they have ever known for the past 400 years with all of their worldly possessions on their backs. And now Moses has to go to them and say, "Hi, brother, that's a nice bangle. You have to give it for the tabernacle." And well, Moses, knowing a thing or two about the stubbornness of Israel, would have had almost every right, in my opinion, to have said, "You sure about this, God?" But Moses dutifully obeys. He goes to the Israelites and he says, everybody has to freely offer up gold, yarns, stones. And the Israelites do. They freely give all their precious things towards the contribution of this thing called the tabernacle. And the two master craftsmen, Oholiab and Bezalel, they take all the raw materials and they begin to craft them into little factions of the tabernacle, all the little articles to build the tabernacle. How exact are God's instructions to them? This is just an example from one artifact in the tabernacle, the ark. And it goes like this. You must make the ark of acacia wood. Must be 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits broad, 1.5 cubits high. Overlay it with pure gold in and out, and you must make a molding of gold around it. Cast 4 rings of gold, each on the feet, 2 rings on one side and 2 rings on the other. Make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. And then you must put the poles into the rings so that you can carry the ark. The poles must never leave the ark. This is a pretty exact set of instructions, right? And this is just for one article in the tabernacle. Every single item had a whole long list of instructions. We too must follow God's instructions to us. And what does God tell us to do? Well, first of all, it helps to know exactly what this tabernacle was for. Why did they need to carefully go and make all the ark and the altar and the candelabra? So let me explain to you what the tabernacle is. Tabernacle is not a very commonly used word, right? It's definitely, if someone says tabernacle, you're definitely a Christian. Okay? Tabernacle is related to the word tavern, also another unused word nowadays, which means basically a place where someone can dwell. In this case, it means a place where God can dwell. And the Hebrew word for tabernacle is mishkan. You say mishkan? Mishkan. So Mishkan is a place where God's Shekinah, the dwelling place of God, can rest. Okay, so the root word of Mishkan is shachan. And this is basically our passage for today. These little dots in red are the times where the word shachan appears. It appears no less than 10 times. The significance of the tabernacle was to be not just physical. I mean, if you looked at the map of the tabernacle from above, you would see that the one solid focus of the whole area was this thing in the center, the tabernacle. But textually as well, as you read, if you were a Hebrew reader, you see this thing just jumping up at you, dwelling place, tabernacle, the place where I dwell. And so this thing comes through very clearly. What was the tabernacle for? The tabernacle was not for God per se. It was for God to dwell among His people so that the people would not be struck dead on account of His holiness. God cannot stand sin because he is completely holy. And so Israel carefully obeyed all of God's commands regarding the tabernacle, right? The whole nation of Israel does exactly what God says. They go and construct the tabernacle lovingly and carefully. And when they did, we find that a very remarkable thing happens. Exodus 40, which is talking confusingly about the same day as Numbers 9, which is the first of Nisan, says this, okay? In the first month of the second year, on the first day of the month, that's first of Nisan, the tabernacle was erected. Then the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. This, by the way, is the ending of the book of Exodus. Everything climaxes in this amazing picture where the people have done all that they can, and now they just wait. They've waited for their first of Nisan, and now God comes as he promised. And Moses was unable to enter the tent of meeting because the cloud settled on it, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. How do we apply this to our lives today? Right? We're not about to make tabernacles out in any desert. So what does this look like for us in the 21st century? First of all, we need to obediently follow all of God's instructions, just like the Israelites did. What are God's instructions to us? Well, Jesus gives us two very clear examples, right? Simple one, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself. Two simple lines to remember, so difficult to live out. These two commands summarize the 10 Commandments. The first one summarizes the first 4. The second one summarizes the next 6. And as we think about how the Israelites obediently, collectively, carefully obeyed God's law, we also need to look at the 10 Commandments and think, well, how carefully and obediently am I following God's law? I mean, do I have any other gods besides the Lord? Do I have myself a carved image, an idol in my life? Now, sometimes our idols are very sinister, and we know that they're idols, right? Like the idol of self-glorification, the idol of lust, the idol of loving wealth. But sometimes they are more innocuous. You know, our hobbies, our grandchildren, those can also become idols if we are not careful. God says, I alone must be Lord in your heart. How many of us keep the Sabbath holy? I know this is really difficult in modern-day Singapore, but that's also one of the 10 Commandments. One of the 10 Commandments is to keep the Sabbath. And the second is like it. Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. But do we truly love our neighbors as ourselves? Do we love even our brothers within the church as ourselves? Do we honor our fathers and our mothers? Do we have murderous rage when someone cuts you off? I know this is really difficult because I'm a driver too, but this is really one of the places where this commandment comes to the fore in our lives. You shall not murder, you shall not have murderous rage. What about adultery? Do we have lustful thoughts? Or how many Christian marriages are really free of infidelities compared to the non-Christian marriages? Do we really see a big difference in the way we live our lives? What about theft? Maybe we don't all go into a 7-Eleven and nick a loaf of bread, or we don't sneak into the record store and steal a CD or something. Those don't exist anymore. But I mean, do we steal things? Do we steal our employer's time? Do we steal non-tangibles, but that things that can be stolen in any case? Do we gossip? Do we covet? And so just a simple look at the 10 Commandments reveal that sometimes we also fail to follow God's instructions. In fact, we don't fail for lack of effort. We're not even that interested. We know that the laws are there, but sometimes it's everything we can do to bring ourselves to say, yes, Lord, this is an area that I want to submit to you. So these two commandments that Jesus gave remind us that they are the ways that we can obey God, that we can follow his instructions exactly. A second way to apply this, I think, is to remember that we ourselves are tabernacles. As amazing as that sounds. I know that in 1 Kings, Solomon, after building his grand temple for 7 years, he stands back and as the glory indwells, he says, what? Heaven and the highest heaven cannot contain you. What less this man-made structure? Still less sinful men. But it's true. God deigned to dwell among them then, and he deigns to dwell among us now. In 1 Corinthians, Paul reminds us twice, you are God's temple. The Holy Spirit of God dwells in you and me. And that is an incredible thought. If that is the case, if we are really his tabernacles, then we have to make sure that we are daily swept clean, that the sacrifices are faithfully offered, that the lamps are always trimmed, the oil is always topped up, and we need to be ready then to host the holy presence of God. And as we do, we will then be ready to go forth into the world and to impact society with the fragrant aroma of Jesus arising continually from our altar of incense. So we've learned two things, right? We've learned that in order to benefit from God's guidance, we need patience to follow his timing. We also need a heart of obedience to follow his instructions. I now turn to the third posture that I believe we need, and that is perseverance. A perseverance to follow at all costs. Numbers 9 closes with, at the command of the Lord they camped, and at the command of the Lord they set out. They kept the charge of the Lord by Moses. This isn't one of the most readable passages in the Bible. It's not really one that we tend to savor line by line, right? I think we got the idea a couple of verses back. Why does Moses belabor the point, all these verses, telling us that when God moved, then the Israelites moved. When God stopped, the Israelites stopped. I think one of the reasons is that the idea of the perseverance, of this stop-start persevering through the journey from Goshen to Canaan really comes to the fore as we read this. Even when we read it, separated as we are from the dust and the sands of the Sinai, we also feel very, very picture, right? Like, oh, stop and start, stop and start. And this idea comes through in the text. I want you to think for a moment with me how troublesome it would have been for the Israelites out in the desert. This is the scene that's familiar to many of us, right? The route march. I want you to imagine that you are back in route march, or you are with your brother or husband or friend back in the army, and you are marching. But you have no boots, and you certainly don't have this fancy pavement to walk on. Instead, you're wearing sandals, you're trudging through soft sand, the wind is in your face, the sand is in your eyes, you feel very, very dusty, and you are trudging along with all your mission essentials. Not only that, you're pretty much trudging along with everything you ever owned, because you just got kicked out of Egypt. So everything that you could grab, you took with you. To top that off, you are with your parents. And your parents are saying, did you remember to bring this? Did you remember to bring that? Don't forget this. You're walking and you're walking. Not only that, you are with your kids. 4 kids, right? And each of them is crying and hungry and thirsty, and they all want to be hugged by you and carried by you. And your wife is telling you a piece of her mind. And so you are walking there, following the cloud in the distance, and it's not stopping, and so neither are you. You are continuing to walk. One day, the cloud stops. And you say, praise the Lord. You don't need to be told twice. You take everything off. You make all the kids do a water parade. You set up the field bed. Your wife says, okay, put the water on the boil because tonight we're not going to have any raw manna. We're going to have some proper roast quail. And so everyone's very excited. And the whole tribe, in fact, the whole nation is ready and resting and ready to partake of this feast. And that night, as you eat of the food, you're really relishing, wow, this tastes so nice. And just as you eat the second morsel, you think you must be dreaming, but the cloud is moving again. And so you say, this can't be true. But the platoon sergeant of your tribe says, yeah, it's true. Everything on, let's go, move it. So you quite pack everything into your bag. You quickly eat up all the quail. It doesn't even taste that nice anymore because you have to rush through it. And then everything it's on the move again. And so you move on, trudging in the sands, trudging in the cold, trudging in the heat. And then again, lo and behold, the cloud stops. Now this time, you're clever, right? You say, no, kids, don't take everything out yet. Just take out the bare minimums because you never know when this cloud is going to move again. So, no, keep the field beds. You only can sleep on the ground sheets. No fancy quail tonight. You're just going to have manna. Okay, what's wrong with water? What's the matter with you, young man? And so you live like this, on constant alert for 24 hours. 24 hours grows into 48 hours. The 2 days become a week. Nothing from the cloud is still there. So you say, okay, but I'm not taking any chances. But 1 month, no sound, no picture. And so you begin to wonder, okay, maybe it's time. And your kids are complaining, how come my friends get to, go and play and they get to eat quail 4 ways? And, how come it's so uncomfortable? And you, with the sore back from sleeping on the ground sheet for the past month, you agree with them. So you say, okay, maybe I've been too harsh on you for the past month. We're going to start living a little, okay? So we take out the few beds, we put the water on the boil, we're going to prepare for a nice meal tonight. And so that evening, it's really a sumptuous meal. Your parents are saying, wow, this is so nice. You're under the Sinai sky, the stars, you eat. And you keep an eye out for the fire and the cloud, but it doesn't move. So you say, okay, fine. And that night, you go to bed, you hold your wife's hand and you say, I'm sorry, I've been such a pain the past month. Everything will be okay. And then you go to sleep. In the middle of the night, lo and behold, your platoon sergeant says, it's time to go. Come on, let's pack up. And you begrudgingly pack everything in your bag, and you go again. This was the kind of perseverance and obedience that the Israelites had. And the next time you read this passage, I want you to remember just how difficult, how much perseverance the Israelites must have had trudging out there for a year, and then 2, and then 40 in the desert. But that was the perseverance that they had. They stuck it for the long haul. How do we apply this in our lives today? We're not going to go on a 40-day route march, much less a 40-year route march, thank God. But persevering at all costs, we know, is difficult. But we have marches of our own, right, in our lives. And when God calls us to places of obedience, sometimes we feel like obeying the first few times. After the spiritual high of a church camp, we may feel we can take on anything for the Lord. But anyone who has tried to do that realizes that the willpower quickly dissipates when we try to run things on our own steam. I think there are 2 things that can help us to persevere. One of them is to remember where you are headed. The Sinai was bearable because of the promise that Canaan held. Let me say that again. The Sinai was bearable because of the promise that Canaan held. The Israelites were able to endure the sweat and the heat because they looked forward to the land flowing with milk and honey. And this wasn't just a myth. They had proof. Joshua and Caleb came back with the luscious fruits, and they couldn't believe it, and they said, this land is real, and we are going there. And that's why they endured. We too have our proof of our Canaan. We have the indwelling Holy Spirit, the assurance, the guarantee of the inheritance that is to come. And we too, like Jesus, must, for the joy that is set before us, endure the cross, despise its shame, and press on towards the prize. We must persevere at all costs because in the end, the promised land is worth it. The second thing I think that can help us to persevere is mutual encouragement. The Israelites had one thing, if at all, out in the desert, and that was company. Scholars estimate there are about 2 to 3 million of them. How do they get to this number? Numbers 1 says there are about 603,000 fighting men. So if every one of them has a wife or 2 and 3 or 4 children and mom and dad, then that is easily 2 to 3 million, conservative number. Okay? So just to give you a perspective on size, COH, Celebration of Hope. How many of you were at COH? Very good. COH, the seating capacity of the sports hub is 55,000. So you have to multiply that by 36 times to even come close to a conservative number for how many Israelites there were out there marching in the desert. And so you get a sense that they, together, marching alongside each other, made the journey more bearable for each other. When I was in JC, they put this verse up on the wall. And you see it? It says, let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. This is next to the running track. And so you can imagine, right, the sense of humor that the sports people had by putting this up next to the wall. And countless exhausted students must have drawn strength from these immortal words, passing it every 400 meters, wishing that someone had told them about tapering sooner. But this verse really struck my wife and I. We're JC classmates. And so we inscribed this verse on our wedding bands, reminding us that we need to persevere through the long-distance race that is our marriage, and we need to persevere through the marathon that is life. I wonder if any of you remember Cassie Carstens, the speaker from, I think last year, and the founder of the World Needs a Father movement. He quoted something that really struck a chord in me. It's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think this really exemplifies the point very well. We need each other. We need the church in order for us to persevere. We need to encourage and spur each other on to love and to good deeds, just as we need our cell members to come alongside us, and as we need to come alongside them in their times of need. Journeying through life, trying to obey God, trying to please Him is difficult. Perseverance is hard. Don't do it alone. One spiritual discipline I believe that many Christians could really benefit from and struggle with is daily Bible reading. Right? I mean, I know all of us start January 1, we begin with Genesis 1, and then we slowly get to Abraham, he's promised the land. After a very long time, we get to Joseph, finally the blessings of the children. Very few of us ever make it to Egypt, right? That's usually the way it goes. And I really want to encourage us that it doesn't have to be that way. Like, Bible plans abound on the internet. You can find many plans, chronological plans, Bible in a year, Bible in 3 years, 1 chapter a day. Whatever it is, getting to it isn't the hard part, but sticking to it is. And it's a lot easier if you do it together. With one or with two people, you can say, hey, how was that passage today? Well, I really thought that today's message was interesting. Or if you do it in a group, like Bible Study Fellowship, where you systematically study the Bible, you get to reflect on how God is using the passage to speak not just to you, but to also about 10 or 13 other people of your age group. So it's a really wonderful thing to be able to study the Bible together, and it also makes it much easier. And I encourage all of us to try to do that. I needn't remind everyone, of course, that reading the Bible is also in itself probably the best way to get to know God's Spirit, know His person, and to hear His guidance. We may not have a great giant physical cloud of pillar and fire hovering over BBTC today, but God continues to guide us and to lead us. More than 3,000 years after the Exodus, more than 8,000 kilometers away from the Sinai Peninsula, God continues to guide. He guides us by His Word, the Holy Bible, as He brings scriptures to mind at exactly the right times that we need it. He guides us through aligned circumstances, where you meet the right person, or things line up so perfectly that you know that this is God doing it. He guides us in many ways as well. Sometimes when you're worshiping, He downloads a picture into your mind. Sometimes a friend out of the blue texts you a word of encouragement that you were just thinking about that day. God guides us in many different ways. Obviously, He's not limited to the ways that He can guide. And we need to be sensitive to His guidance, to listen out when these things start to impress themselves on our minds. Sometimes God guides us on easy decisions, and we seek Him for things like, should I read my Bible today? The answer to which is always, right. Sometimes we ask God for guidance on slightly more difficult issues, maybe things like, and this is usually between two good choices, right? Like, is this godly man or is that godly man the one for me? Or maybe, should I use my hard-earned bonus to bless my needy parents or to bless needy strangers? Sometimes it's things like, should I quit my job and become a missionary, or should I become a foster parent? These are all difficult choices between noble options. And I don't presume to have the answers to these questions, but I do know who does. As we seek God's guidance, will you claim His word in Psalm 119? He says that my word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And will you ask Him to shine this light onto the path ahead and ask Him, God, what comes next? What comes next? Sometimes you will find that the cloud moves within a day. At other times, it can feel like years since the cloud last moved. But God knows intimately the struggle that you are going through in your life. And yet, He calls us to perseverance, whatever the cost. As we do so, He promises to guide us, to lead us, and He promises to guide us by His Holy Spirit. He says that He will never leave us nor forsake us, and He's been to the promised land. so we can trust that He knows how to get us there. I want to close by bringing us back to the jungle where we began. Worship team, you can come up to the stage. I was in the jungle myself many years ago. I too heard the GPS saying, make a U-turn, and I resolutely ignored that voice. It was in my backpack, and I put it beneath all the other things in my bag, the joys of life, the wanting to have a good time. I wasn't interested in what God was saying to me. I was born in a Christian home, and there's a particular danger about being too familiar with the church, thinking we know what God is about. And so from a young age, I was very accustomed to the church world and knowing what to say and having all the right answers. But I was also very allured by the world outside. I had a brush with the law, and some of the older uncles and aunties in this church may remember that it was a period of intense trial for my family. They completely didn't expect this from me, that you know, a nice boy doing okay in school, suddenly he would have this brush with the law. I came back to the Lord and promised Him that I would follow His guidance. But thereon in, some years later, again I drifted. When it came to Army and JC, to JC and Army, I completely was out there, exposed to the world, and I got exposed to smoking, to drinking. I couldn't help myself, but every single sentence that I said almost inevitably had a profanity, and it was so embarrassing. God used many things to guide me back to Him. The funny thing about this GPS, though, is that the battery doesn't die. And it has a funny way of changing your route and changing the geography around which you're trying to get to bring you to where it wants you to go. One of the signposts that the GPS used, that God used, was that I had a friend in college and we were out drinking, and the person looked at me stunned and said, "I can't believe you're a Christian." And we were all pretty hazy by then, but those words struck very deep in me. And the next day when I woke up, I found myself thinking, my goodness, I'm a terrible testimony. I'm such a shame to my Lord and my Savior. When that happened, over the course of the year, I began to resolve, this has to have a change. The end of that year, 2008, was Come Bless the Lord. And I was in this very hall where I resolved to the Lord, Lord, I want no more of this double life. I want to follow your guidance. I want to go the way that you have asked me to go. Will you help me? The next day, January the 1st, 2009, I opened my Bible dutifully at Genesis 1. Never before in all my years of Sunday school and Christianity had I ever attempted to read the Bible through cover to cover. But that year, I told myself I was going to try. I'd heard it from the pulpit. I'd been encouraged by it many times. I said, okay, I'm going to set myself one chapter a day. I know it'll take me maybe 3 years plus. I'm going to do it, one chapter a day. 3 years later, or 4 years later, I really did finish the Bible for the first time. Now, at the start of 2019, was the 7th time I'd read the Bible through. And I just look back on the God who guided me, who delivered me, who really pulled me back from the precipice of where I was going, where I could have ended up. It started out harmlessly enough with cigarettes and alcohol, but it could have ended far worse with substance abuse, with very dark places. God pulled me back using all sorts of ways and means. And I believe that He's calling some of us to do the same as well. As I reflected on His faithfulness the past 10 years, and it's been exactly a decade, 2009 to 2019, I reflected on the words of this song, Never Once by Matt Redman. And the lyrics go like this: standing on this mountaintop, looking just how far we've come, knowing that for every step you were with us. Never once did we walk alone. Never once did you leave us on our own. You are faithful. God, you are faithful. And I just told myself, really, God, you are faithful to guide. You guided me all those years when I didn't think that you were even with me. I didn't think you wanted to have anything to do with me. I certainly didn't want to have anything to do with you. But you guided me faithfully. As the music plays on, can I invite you to close your eyes and reflect on these words? Our God is a God who guides, who has indeed been guiding you and I along, all this while, whether you realized it or not. If you have strayed from His pillar of cloud, will you come back to Him today? Maybe tonight when you go back home, will you once more get down on your knees as you did those many years ago and begin to pray to Him and ask Him to indwell you as He indwelt the tabernacle? God does guide, church, but when He does, we must follow. Or maybe you are seeking God's guidance on a particular matter, and the cloud seems not to have moved in years and years. Will you ask Him for patience, obedience, and perseverance to follow His guidance? This God, who calls Himself Yahweh, who guided Israel out of Egypt, guides us still today. This God, who guided Israel through the Sinai, guides us still today. And this God, who guided Israel into Canaan, guides us still today. May you leave this place, church, assured of His guidance and determined to follow it.